the laughter started, before the elevator doors even closed. Rosalind Achebe heard it from the end of the hallway. That particular kind of laughter, the kind people don't bother to muffle, because they don't think the person they're laughing at matters enough to hide it from. She was pushing the housekeeping cart around the corner of the 14th floor of the Harrington Grand, one wheel squeaking the way it always did on Tuesdays after the morning rush, when she caught the tail end of it. Did you see her uniform? Like she borrowed it from her grandmother. More laughter. Then, honestly, at this rate, my grandmother could do this job faster. Rosalind didn't stop. She kept her eyes on the hallway ahead, guided the cart, past room 1412, past teen 14, past the little alcove with the ice machine that always smelled faintly of mildew, no matter how many times she reported it. She had learned, in 8 months at the Harrington Grand, that stopping accomplished nothing. Stopping meant engaging. Engaging meant their day got more interesting. And hers got harder. The voices belonged to 2 of the junior event coordinators from the hotel's banquet division, Tristan Laurier, and a young woman named Kelsey Nakamura Briggs, who had transferred from the Toronto office sometime in the fall and had spent most of her time since then making sure everyone knew she'd rather be back there. They were leaning against the window at the end of the hall, take-out coffee cups in hand, watching Rosalind maneuver the cart with the mild, entertained contempt of people who have never once considered that they might be wrong about someone. Rosalind was 29 years old. She had graduated 6 years earlier from Dalhousie University with a degree in hospitality management and a minor in business administration. She spoke 3 languages fluently, English, French, and Igbo, and could hold a workable conversation in Mandarin. She had worked in hotels in Halifax, in Montreal, and for a brief educational period in Lyon, France, where she had learned what genuine hospitality culture looked like when it wasn't porfing itself. None of that was visible from the end of the hallway. What was visible was the cart, the uniform, and a young black woman who moved quietly and didn't make eye contact. That was, as far as Tristan and Kelsey were concerned, the whole picture. "How long does it even take to clean one room?" Tristan said, not lowering his voice at all. "We've been standing here longer than she's been working." Kelsey laughed again, then loudly enough to carry. "No rush, sweetheart. Take your time." Rosalind stopped outside room 1416. She pulled her keycard from her apron, pressed it to the lock, and went inside. She did not look back, but her jaw was tight and she stood still in the middle of the room for a moment. Just a moment. Before she began to strip the bed with the practiced efficiency of someone who had made peace with the fact that the world sometimes requires you to absorb things that were never yours to carry. She had taken this job on purpose. That was the part nobody knew. Her name, her full name, was Rosalind Achebe Harrington. The Harrington part was her mother's maiden name, and her mother's father had been Edmund Harrington, who had opened the first Harrington Grand in Ottawa in 1987, and who had died 4 years ago, leaving behind a hospitality group that now encompassed 11 hotels across Canada, a conference center in Banff, and a boutique resort on Vancouver Island that had been featured in Condé Nast 3 times running. Rosalind's mother, Dr. Vivian Achebe Harrington, currently served as chair of the Harrington Group's board of directors. The role of chief operating officer had been held for the past 2 years by Rosalind's older brother, who was excellent at the financial architecture of the business, and had admitted freely that he had no instinct for the operational side. The human side, the side that determined whether a guest felt like a person or a transaction. That was Rosalind's side. She had proposed the idea to her mother 18 months ago, over dinner at the family home in Westboro. She wanted to spend a year working at ground level, not in management, not as an anonymous consultant, but actually working. Housekeeping, front desk, banquet service, kitchen prep. She wanted to understand the Harrington Grand from the inside out, from the cart with the squeaky wheel up. Her mother had listened carefully, in the way she listened to everything, and then said, You understand that if anyone treats you poorly, I need you to document it and not handle it yourself." Rosalind had agreed, mostly. The Harrington Grand Toronto was, by every measurable metric, the flagship of the family's portfolio. It was also, as Rosalind had come to understand over 8 months, on its floors, a hotel with a particular culture problem. Specifically, a culture in which the Emergency department had come to believe that the building operated in service of them rather than the other way around. Tristan Laurier had been there 4 years and had never been formally reviewed. Kelsey Nakamura-Briggs' first issue flag in her file from the Toronto transfer that no one had followed up on. Their direct manager, a man named Gordon Fleury, was the kind of manager who prioritized smoothness over accountability, who had, on at least 3 documented occasions, chosen to smooth over a complaint rather than investigate it, because investigating it would have been uncomfortable. Rosalind knew all of this because she had read every personnel file in the department before she started. She had simply been waiting to see whether what was on paper matched what was real. It matched. It matched exactly. There was a morning in November. A Tuesday, same as today, same squeaking wheel. When Rosalind had been mopping the atrium floor near the main entrance, and Tristan had walked by with a group of clients, pointed at her, and said, "Don't worry, someone will get that," as if she weren't standing right there, as if she were furniture that had briefly malfunctioned. She had written it down that evening in the notebook she kept in her locker. Date, time, exact words. Her mother had asked for documentation. Rosalind had documentation. There was a Wednesday in December when Kelsey had sent a complaint to HR about the housekeeping staff taking too long on the 14th floor and causing a delay for an event setup. The complaint named Rosalind specifically, using only her employee ID number and a description that read, "The older one with the cart." Rosalind was 29. The complaint had been filed without any evidence of an actual delay. Gordon Fleury had forwarded it to the housekeeping supervisor with a note that said, "Can we look at staffing on 14 during event days?" No investigation, no pushback, just smooth, frictionless reassignment of fault. Rosalind had that email too. By March, the notebook had 43 entries. She finished room 1416 in 22 minutes, well within standard, not that anyone was timing her in good faith, and moved to 1418. The hallway was quiet now. Tristan and Kelsey had gone, presumably to do whatever it was they did between creating problems and not solving them. She was midway through 1418 when her phone buzzed. She checked it in the bathroom, gloves off, hands clean. The message was from her mother. "Board has moved the April review up. They want Q1 presentations by end of this month. You still on track?" Rosalind typed back, "More than on track. I'll be ready." She meant it. She'd been ready for weeks. The operational audit she had quietly assembled over 8 months. Staffing gaps, guest complaint patterns, departmental culture issues, cost inefficiencies in event coordination, 3 separate HR situations that had been mishandled, was thorough enough to stand on its own. But she'd wanted more time on the floor. She'd wanted to be certain that what she'd seen wasn't a bad week or a bad month. It wasn't. It was a culture. And it had been allowed to grow because nobody at the ground level had ever held any real authority. Until now, she supposed. She pulled her gloves back on and went back to work. The incident that Thursday would have been unremarkable if it hadn't been quite so public. The Harrington Grand's main atrium was the architectural heart of the building. Marble floors, a 30-foot glass ceiling that let in the pale Toronto spring light, a fountain that had been photographed for approximately 10,000 Instagram posts. It was, on weekday mornings, busy in a particular way. Business people crossing quickly, coffee cups in hand, everyone performing a version of important. Rosalind was there because the cleaning schedule put her there on Thursdays at 9:15. She had the floor polisher, not the cart, and she was working a section near the fountain that had developed a faint salt residue from the winter. The kind of thing that only shows when the light hits it right. The kind of thing that guests notice without knowing why the floor looks slightly off. She noticed it. She was fixing it. Kelsey came through the atrium with 4 people. Rosalind didn't recognize. Guests, by the look of them, or potential clients, dressed with that particular careful polish that meant they were trying to impress someone or be impressed. Kelsey was in presentation mode, gesturing broadly, speaking in the clipped, confident tone she used when she wanted to project authority. And of course the atrium is fully available for private events. We can dress the whole space, lighting, florals, the works. She didn't see Rosalind until she was almost on top of her. Or rather, she saw her and kept going, and then something shifted. Maybe it was the clients watching. Maybe it was just the accumulated weight of 8 months of thinking that no one was paying attention. Whatever it was, Kelsey stopped, turned, and said, clearly, audibly, to the group of people she was trying to impress, "Sorry, this'll be cleaned up by the time you'd need it." She's been at this same spot for 20 minutes. She hadn't been. She'd been at it for 4. The clients looked at Rosalind briefly. The way people look at things that are slightly in the way, and then looked back at Kelsey. Rosalind kept working. She didn't look up. She counted the seconds until they moved on, 6 of them, and then she straightened up, very slowly, and watched them go. A man at the front desk, a newer hire named Samuel, 22 years old, who had always been quietly kind to her in the way some young people are kind when they think no one of consequence is watching, caught her eye from across the atrium. He looked almost pained on her behalf. She gave him a slight nod. He looked relieved somehow, though she couldn't have said exactly why. She finished the atrium floor in full that morning, every centimeter of it. It was, by any reasonable measure, the best it had looked since mid-December. Nobody commented on that. The board presentation was the last Friday of March. Rosalind had requested a room at the Harrington Grand itself, the Confederation boardroom, on the 2nd floor, with the long maple table and the windows that overlooked the courtyard. Her mother had arranged it without asking why. Her brother had called the night before to ask if she wanted him there, and she'd said no, kindly, because this wasn't his part of the business. She arrived at 7:30 in the morning, in clothes that were not her uniform. A dark green blazer, tailored, black trousers, earrings her grandmother had given her. She signed in at the front desk the way she always did, with her employee ID. And then she set her laptop bag down on the front desk counter, opened it, and slid a single card across to the woman at the desk. The card had a different title on it than the woman was expecting. Rosalind Achebe Harrington, Director of Operational Strategy, Harrington Group. The woman at the desk, Patricia, who had been there 12 years, and who Rosalind had always liked, looked at the card, looked at Rosalind, and then looked at the card again. "I'll need conference access for the Confederation room," Rosalind said, "and I'd appreciate a pot of coffee up there by 8 if that's manageable," Patricia said. "Of course. Absolutely. Yes." Rosalind smiled at her, genuinely, picked up her bag, and headed for the elevator. The board met at 9. There were 7 members, including her mother, who sat at the far end of the table, with the same expression she'd worn at every important moment of Rosalind's life: alert, patient, entirely withheld. Rosalind stood at the front of the room and presented for 45 minutes. She presented the operational data, efficiency metrics, staffing patterns, cost analyses, cleanly and without editorializing. She presented the guest experience findings, complaint patterns, fruit, resolution rates, the gap between what the Harrington Grand's reputation promised and what the ground-level experience sometimes delivered. She presented 3 case studies of hospitality organizations that had successfully restructured their departmental culture and the resulting impact on retention and revenue. And then, because her mother had asked for documentation, she presented the documentation. 43 incidents, logged by date and time. 3 mishandled HR situations, with the relevant email chains. A pattern of behavior in the event coordination department that had been allowed to operate unchecked, because the management chain above it had optimized for smoothness at the expense of accountability. She did not name every name on every slide, but the names were in the supporting document, which she emailed to each board member's tablet as she reached that section. One of the board members, a man named Raymond, who had been there since her grandfather's time, leaned forward and said, "You collected all of this yourself, while you were working the floors?" "Yes," Rosalind said, "for 8 months, 8 months and 11 days. Raymond sat back. He looked at her mother looked at the table. The board voted. It was not close. Gordon Fleury received notice that afternoon. His position was being restructured, which was the polite way of saying that the position, as he had been performing it, no longer existed. He was offered a transition package that was fair and considerably more generous than what his performance record warranted, because the Harrington family had always believed that how you treat people on the way out matters as much as how you treat them on the way in. Tristan Laurier and Kelsey Nakamura-Briggs were called into separate meetings with HR the following Monday. The meetings were documented, thorough, and not comfortable. Tristan's contract was not renewed at the end of his current term. Kelsey was placed on a formal performance improvement plan, not because her behavior had been worse than Tristan's, but because the review of her file suggested that some of what had been allowed to calcify might have been preventable with earlier intervention, and the organization owed her at least the attempt. Neither of them knew for several days who had initiated the review. When they found out, when the internal announcement went out naming Rosalind Achebe Harrington as Director of Operational Strategy with a specific mandate for the Toronto flagship, Tristan apparently said nothing. Kelsey, by the account that made it back to Rosalind through 3 different people, sat down very suddenly in the middle of the event coordination office and said, "The housekeeper." Not unkindly, not with cruelty, just with the particular, hollow shock of someone who has just understood that the story they thought they were in was not the story that was actually happening. Samuel, the young man at the front desk, was nominated for the Harrington Group's Internal Service Recognition Award that quarter. Rosalind wrote the nomination herself. In the comments section, she noted his consistent professionalism and his instinct for human decency, in moments when decency wasn't required of him. He won. He seemed genuinely baffled by it, which she found both charming and a little heartbreaking. The squeaky wheel on cart 14 was fixed in April. Maintenance had it on a list. It just needed someone with the authority to make it a priority. Rosalind made a lot of things a priority that spring. The mildew smell in the ice machine alcove on the 14th floor. The complaint resolution backlog that had been sitting in an HR inbox since November. A new peer feedback structure for department heads that made accountability lateral as well as vertical, so that no one manager could smooth over a pattern by simply choosing not to see it. She also instituted a quarterly review process for the event coordination team that had never existed before. Not punitive, not theatrical, just honest. Here is what the metrics show. Here is what the guest experience data shows. Here is where we are, and here is where we need to go. Some of the staff found it uncomfortable at first. Most of them, within 2 quarters, said they preferred it. Clarity, it turned out, was something most people wanted more than they wanted to be left alone with their assumptions. On a Tuesday in September, Rosalind was walking the 14th floor. Not with a cart. This time, though she thought about the cart sometimes, the way you think about a teacher you didn't fully appreciate until later. She was doing a walkthrough with the new housekeeping supervisor, a woman named Beatrix Osikaba, who had been promoted from within and who had strong opinions about microfiber versus cotton for marble surfaces, and was right about all of them. They stopped at the ice machine alcove. It smelled clean. It had smelled clean since May. "This was your first fix, wasn't it?" Beatrix said. Not accusing, just knowing the way people in a building know things. "Third," Rosalind said. "The cartwheel was first. The complaint backlog was second." Beatrix considered this. Smart order. The cartwheel was personal. Rosalind said. The other two were strategic. They kept walking. The floor was quiet in the way hotels are quiet on Tuesday afternoons. Not empty, just held between the business of morning and the business of evening, all its purposes briefly suspended. There are people who will look at someone like Rosalind, young, in a service uniform, moving quietly through the margins of a building, and see limitation. They will see the uniform and not the person wearing it. They will see the cart and not the mind pushing it. They will measure the distance between themselves and what they imagine her to be. And they will feel, for a moment, the comfortable superiority of people who have never been tested by anything that required them to be more than what they currently are. And then one day, the story will turn around, the way stories do. And they will understand. In a hallway or a HR meeting or the particular silence of an office after an announcement has just been, that they were never seeing the whole picture. That the person they overlooked was looking back. That the woman pushing the cart was the one who would eventually decide the shape of the building. Rosalind had not done any of this to prove something to Tristan Laurier or Kelsey Nakamura Briggs. She had done it because the work mattered, because the building mattered, because the people inside it, all of them, from the boardroom to the 14th floor, deserved a place that was built on something more durable than assumption. But she would be lying if she said there wasn't a particular, quiet satisfaction in doing it well. The atrium floor gleamed in the September afternoon light. She had made sure of it.